So, away from the PS2, entering the PSP. Yes, so this game technically received a PS2 port, but so far these are the versions that Sony has generally put on the backward compatibility program, starting with Size Matters, made by a complete different studio, High Impact Games, made by former Insomniac and Naughty Dog developers, and with the specific goal as, can we manage to make a traditional Ratchet and Clank experience fit into the PSP? And the following question is, how many concessions do we need to take? For starters, I can tell you, this actually has good subtitles, so it's already something better than what Insomniac did on the PS2. But as for the story and gameplay, that's what we're about to find out. Starting with Pokitaru, familiar location.
Come on, Ratchet.
And
Let's fly
hey!
towards that PNG.
And hey, similar to Crash Bandicoot, we start out on a beach.
The cutscenes are all pre-rendered, this is why they are not upscaled.
The sun is murder today. I swear, Clank, I'm done with all that hero stuff. Now let somebody else save the universe. I need a little me time.
If there is trouble, then it is our duty to ensure that...
Yeah, as for this game, it's officially their job, which was kind of hinted in Deadlocked as well.
Fucking tourists.
What are you doing?
I'm taking pictures.
This adorable little cherub is voiced by Nicole
And I
Sullivan,
recognize you from the new
with a very noticeable lisp.
right?
Well, I see you haven't...
Even
How
integrating the
adorable.
subtitles, because I noticed that Jean d'Arc also has that. The PSP had a kind of a knack for putting something like lisp in written format in the subtitles. I get what they're trying
The
to do, but
accents, yeah.
it's a bit distracting.
I was thinking maybe you could fight some robots or something.
Like most early Mad TV stars, she also became a voice actor.
I like the fact that Ratchet starts a bit snarky, but actually decides on his own goodwill to actually, help this little girl for the sake of, pleasing a fan. That's kind of nice of him.
regret this.
Yeah,
I mean, by
there's
this
been-
point in the chronology, it would only make sense for it to be that way.
Alright, so,
The memory stick duo.
a lot of things to say. First of all, the overall look. Keep in mind, as mentioned, this is the PS4/PS5 emulated version, meaning that it prioritizes, as mentioned when we did Resistance Retribution, upscaling, but in order to compromise that, it locks the frame rate at 30 FPS, which, to be fair, is still a bit better than in software mode, which could shug in a couple of places. So at the very least, you're getting a better experience, but unfortunately, gone are the 60 FPS for at least decent Secret Agent Clank. Unfortunately, I do not know if with an actual PSP emulator on PC you can actually upgrade that, but something tells me probably not, or it would be, it will cause issues on the run.
It
A lot
is
of
truly
times-
funny to think that for a good near decade, 30 FPS was just accepted to be the norm.
If I remember correctly, even on the PSP, the game did run at 30. I don't think it ran at 60.
Honestly, I don't really remember that many games that on the PSP actually did have 60 FPS to begin
Yeah,
with.
Also, speaking of Crash Bandicoot, our first level is on a beach where we fight crabs to start off.
Also, I need to explain something. You might give the impression that the camera is kind of fucked up, but that's on me rather than the game. See, I mentioned this a couple of times, but in recent times my DualShock 4 has started having its right analog stick drifting. So if I actually start moving using the left analog stick, the camera decides to go wherever it wants. Thankfully, since this was a PSP game, it also uses the directional pad for strafing and moving properly. So for both this and Secret Agent Clank, you'll see me using that. I was just adjusting to that, as it was going on.
Press select to enter first-person mode.
So, your starting weapon is a traditional machine gun-like pistol, the Lacerator. Again, if there's something that I can tell is that the for this game, most of the weapons will be original, even if they still have the same functionality of previous games in the franchise, other weapons like a rocket launcher, a grenade launcher, and so on. But they will have a spark of originality. Secret Agent Clank will mix things up by having a couple of returning weapons from previous games.
Try using the analog stick to select
Again, just in order to spice things up a bit. Like in this case, another one of your starting weapons is a glove that spews acid grenades.
I've been checking High Impact Games' repertoire. This was the first game they made. They would later go on to make stuff such as Secret Agent Clank, Jack and Daxter: The Lost Frontier, Phineas and Ferb Across the Second Dimension, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, where they assisted the Wii port, DreamWorks Super Carts with a Z, Super Ninja, Go Go Fishing, and their last game, Disney Princess: My Fairy Tale Adventure.
Yeah, it's
Okay, did they get bought by Activision at some point?
No,
'Cause some
but
of those
it's
sound like
they
Activision
work
titles.
subcontract to work for them, but it's one of those companies that eventually kind of fizzled out on its own.
They were doing this game called The Oddities, but it was cancelled.
As
Oh, what a
Pedro
shame.
was talking about of commentary, a lot of the staff team went on to found Big Red Button, and we know how that story ends.
The thing about the PS2 ports of a lot of PSP games back in the day, a lot of times those PS2 ports, you'd think they would be better, but they actually turned out, most of the time they would turn out, it was the same thing with the GTA ports, where Vice City Stories is actually better on the PSP than it is on the PS2, surprisingly, because the port was kind of rushed. It's one of those cases where the games were clearly designed to be run on the screen in resolution of the PSP, so then when they try to put them on the PS2, they run into issues. Which is why I understand the decision from Sony to put the PSP versus this is the platform that the game was made for. So.
Alright,
Anyway.
so Ratchet starts with his default costume from the first game, as you can see, but the good news is that there are still, the armor sets in this game. But this game wants to put a bit of a spin on things. As we're about to get, we're operating a bit with the rules of some of the Mega Man X games. How? By collecting pieces of the armor, which each of them actually gives you, a boost in defense, but if you combine them in certain way, you get different results, and they're usually like elemental themed, so that's pretty neat. Anyway, we're done with touring the girl. Quark, what the fuck?
super. I can't wait to show everyone the pictures.
Quark?
Interesting fact you got there, mate.
coincidence! What are you doing here?
I am trailing Ratchet and Clank to see what they are doing, so I can join in on their next adventure.
Hey, that's what I'm doing! No, wait, I mean...
Sucker.
Do you not have somewhere else to go?
Yeah, here's the
Home
thing.
to your
One thing that I
family,
can actually say is a bit of a negative for this game in particular. Quark's presence is just there. They clearly...
Bird wheel.
Yeah, they really had not much of an idea on what make him do, so they try to have this subplot of him trying to find his family. Again,
Okay,
it's nothing too bad, and it's important for the climax, still, nonetheless, but I've seen better.
Here's my take with the overall premise and plotting of this game.
Thanks for sharing.
They wanted to make
You
this
should attempt to
game
find your real
super
family.
newcomer friendly, to the point where if you played 1, 2, or 3, you'd be fine jumping into this one, essentially.
Chronologically, this takes place at least after Up Your
Looks
Arsenal,
like I'm
if
gonna
not
be late
after
for my
Deadlock.
massage.
We know that
Let's
Secret
go.
Agent Clank has to be taking place after Deadlock. Mind you, though, this is where the other shoe drops in. Continuity-wise, the canonicity of these two spin-off games has been all over the place, because Insomniac,
Yeah.
for lack of a better term, cannot decide for saving their lives if they're canon or not. In 2014, they were saying, no, they're not, it's just not a continuity. in 2017, they were saying that yes, they are technically in continuity, but only this, while instead Secret Agent Clank is an in-universe episode of the show that Clank is filming. And so far, that's the last major statement that they had, so keep in mind, some of the plot elements from this game would not only will not be referenced at all, but will be contradicted by other stuff that the Future Saga did. So at the very least, it's more of a case where TJ Fixman or the people in Insomniac were clearly not paying attention to this when, caring about continuity. And again, for a franchise like this, I get it. You don't need to be super tight all the goddamn time. But, I don't know, I've seen far worse games,
I was about to ask, is this like a portable op situation where for some reason they dislike the game?
Not that I know at the very least. Again, at best it seems to a case where they're just quietly ignoring it if they happen. But honestly, like I said, I'd rather have Deadlock to be ignored compared.
I've been looking at Nicole Sullivan's repertoire. She's also voiced a couple of characters I actually recognise. Mira Nova from Buzz Lightyear Star Command.
Yeah.
And she go off Kim Possible.
And she was also she was also very prominent in various miscellaneous Family Guy roles over the years.
Like Nicole Sullivan is one of pretty much the acting vets of our time at this point.
Oh yeah, no, if you have access to them, I think they're on Amazon digitally. Her roles in Mad TV season 1 and 2, she's such a funny actress. But
I will say this, though. This is, I think, the first time I've ever seen her play a kid character, because most times she usually plays the sassy adult woman, most prominently with Shigo in Kim Possible.
Well, we'll actually get more on what's the deal with the little girl, so don't worry. She's not just a passing cameo NPC.
Right. I should probably also confess, folks, if I had trouble remembering Deadlocked, I sadly have even more trouble remembering the PSP games. This is not to speak of their quality, this is just the fact that I never really owned a PSP as a kid. Anytime I played on PSP, it was with a friend or with a family member who had PSP.
Funnily enough, her Japanese actress, Satomi Korogi, well, at least to me, again, bear in mind I haven't seen that version, she's mostly known for voicing Misty's Togepi.
As far as I know, this is one case where the European version, outside of translated, titles in non-English language, did retain the size master nomenclature. So we're out of different titles. My country basically has a more or less direct translation that basically says size matters. It's not an innuendo technically, but it's still what the actual title says.
It does sort of tie into the theme of the game, too.
But
well, in Japanese...
Yeah, actually, I'm curious, Liv, so what's the Japanese title this time around?
In Japanese, it's called Ratchet and Clank 5 Geki Totsu Dodeka Ginga no Miri Miri Gundam. If you want a rough English translation of that title, it's Ratchet and Clank 5 Clash Miri Miri Core of the Dodeka Galaxy.
Okay, so in Japan, they considered it a mainline title.
Remember,
with the
Joe,
numbering.
they did the same thing with the Crash games, so honestly...
Okay. The difference is, those actually were the mainline games altogether, but this is a PSP spin-off where it's kind of more obvious it's meant to be a spin-off. I admire the passion, don't get me wrong, but still...
Keep in mind, it still had to be also approved by Sony of Japan, so I don't know what to tell you. Also, to instead answer to what instead were you saying, Jova, it's really a shame because I don't think I ever mentioned, but this actually was my first Ratchet and Clank game I ever played. So I have already a sense of familiarity with, and as someone who actually not grew up, but had had an actual PSP, and it wasn't just for the sake of the modding hacking scene, but legitimately bought games for it. Yeah, also another thing, the titanium bolts return, although as you can see they fuck up a bit with the textures. The entire reason why I got a PSP was because, of course, the Dissidia games, specifically the first one. It really was just a game seller because, remember Final Fantasy VII and nostalgic value, and I was like, oh my god, this is this fighting game where it incorporates major characters from previous Final Fantasy, even ones I haven't played. Of course I have to play it. And, I will talk more about that another time, maybe during this very run as well, but because of that I basically got roped into, trying other stuff that the PSP had, like this. So...
Well, the reason I wasn't able to get a PSP was simple. I was a kid, and yes, I was a kid who had saved up my allowance to get a Game Boy Advance, but when the systems for the DS and the PSP came out, yeah, the PSP was just too expensive overall.
I had a PSP for a while myself, and I didn't get this game.
I did want a PSP, but, when it comes to asking the parents for that, they'll go for what's more cost efficient, and in the long run, I don't regret getting the DS instead. And hey, it helps that a lot of PSP titles are now thankfully, becoming available on console experiences, so net gain overall.
I'll elaborate more
point.
later because we're about to get another cutscene. Alright, let's get up and hopefully save the girl.
Target acquired. Proceeding to Galadon.
Shit.
Help me!
Alright,
Can't believe
you're
we
about to get
lost
a couple of, terminology that might catch you off guard,
I do not
but it's
believe they
actually
were
easy to
after
put the
her.
pieces together.
I believe they were after this.
Well, this is, what is this?
If my memory bank serves me correctly, I believe it is a
Basically, the
Technomite
classic
artifact.
stereotype of, the joke about, your machines work because tiny people are inside working on it. The Technomites are supposed to be that.
Technomites are just some fairy
But as
story
Ratchet
that
says,
parents
it's a
tell to
fairy
explain how
tale for
technology works.
children.
They don't really exist.
Aha! Yeah, in this
Arbitrary
massive
skepticism for the
galaxy.
win,
Why those
as
robots
usual.
wanted that child to get this object.
Oh, hey, Quark, you're still here.
Did you? Whoa, that was quite a jog. Is that what I think it is? Oh, gimme! I haven't seen one of these since... Well, I've never actually seen one, but I've heard stories about the Technomites and their...
I do feel like what this game tries to emphasize is much more the humor.
This also serves to have Ratchet still a bit, not a lot, but a bit still on his track as mode, but as you can see, you lose that
Let's get
very
outta here.
quickly.
See ya, Quark, and please, stay out of our way this time.
This is why one of the interpretations fans actually had is that this might have worked better as a transitioning piece between 1 and 2 to showcase how, Ratchet got over, his attitude and became more the heroic type that he's already by the beginning of 2. But again, I'm just fine as they are now.
The Technomites appear to have abandoned this area.
Yeah, the Technomites are real tricky that way. All right, let's get this over with. Where are we going?
Well,
I'd go that way, but that's just me.
Oh, Quark. Why can't you just leave us alone?
Look, I can help you. I've been here before.
do you know where we should take this object?
Of course I do. But what's in it for me?
You want to find your family, right?
Uh-huh.
Well, if you tell us where to go, you can stay here and use our ship's computer to research your family history.
Ooh, great idea. I'll do it.
And as we know, the internet can never lie about these
Where
things.
do we take the artifact?
Try that big building. For some reason, the good stuff is always in the biggest buildings.
Thanks, Quark. You've been helpful.
The thing about the the PSP mostly was an RPG machine. That's what most people remember it fondly for nowadays because of so many RPGs that it had back in the day. As for Quark himself, missed opportunity for that. The fact that nobody ever made a parody of this game with Quark going, "Don't you understand, Ratchet? Don't you see the hat? I am Mrs. Nesbit."
Going back to what I was saying earlier, I definitely feel like this game was made to be newcomer friendly. Like, yes, evidently, if you're aware enough of the timeline, you can tell that this takes place after, Up Your Arsenal. And yeah, there are some details, but what I mean is, like, I could argue you could hop from so much as the first game of this and you wouldn't be lost. And I do get the feeling that might have been the newcomer devs wanting to take it nice and easy with this franchise, especially for a spin-off, at least as far as the titling over here
I
was
mean, I'm
concerned.
gonna one-up that job. I remember it was my first, and yet, I was perfectly fine with that, mostly because I only needed the basic information that I could get from those PlayStation magazine I was reading at the time.
Well, my point is, yes, it's good you caught on, but this game feels like it's made to be newcomer friendly. And mind you, I'm not even saying that as a bad thing, but I do say that I do chalk that up to why some things can feel a bit less nuanced or, not have all the details from the franchise. Again, I'm not saying that like it's a bad thing. I get why they would even want to attract newcomers, especially on, say, the PSP. Like, heck, for all you know, this could have been someone's first time on a Sony device because this was the first time Sony did handheld, so I'm not putting that as a mark against this game. What I do put it as is a reason for why the story can feel weird at times. Like, it feels like they're trying to simplify it mostly for newcomers. That's not saying that it's complete garbage or trash or doesn't work whatsoever, but again, like even you mentioned, you see some aspects they bring back for Ratchet that we haven't seen since the first game, and it's like, yeah, it's to give you a nice landing step.
Yeah, if you paid attention, this cutscene serves you to a reminder in case you didn't notice. Yeah, we have cameras floating around and just, looking at us, and for some reason Clank dismisses that? I don't know, man. You should always be aware of someone snooping around.
Okay, yeah, no, that was a venomous fly trapper just like Crash Bandicoot, and given that there are some ex-Naughty Dog devs on this, was somebody feeling a Crash?
It's clearly done, in a way to, not to be completely identical to that. It's hilarious considering the first Jack and Daxter did have one of the Crash plants as a cameo, in his starting village. Okay.
This game came out in 2007, right?
No, I think it was like a few years before that, like 2000, either 2005 or 2006, definitely before the launch of the PS3.
Okay, so this is before we started to get the true Crash Bandicoot route, so It's not just from Crash Craze, but man, there are definitely a lot of things that remind me of Crash Bandicoot, and hey, okay, I get it, there are Naughty Dog ex-members on the team, so bit of a much doesn't surprise me.
Like also we said, this was the first game that the team developed, so there's a bit of inexperience going on, which would be showcased how because Secret Agent Clank refines a lot of things.
Whoa, hang on there. Now be careful with that. Ooh, that was a close one. Now,
behind you.
It's right behind me, isn't it? And Ratchet died.
So that's how we got Secret Agent Clank. Clank's the only person left, so of course I make the series about him now.
How does
Yeah.
it work?
By shooting mimic plants.
Also, Clank, you don't really seem to be that bothered by the fact that your friend's being eaten alive.
He's gonna be fine.
Transform itself into
He's been
a
through worse.
platform, a creature, whatever you need.
Yeah, this is basically to introduce one of the new gadgets for these
Did you hear that,
automatic, as
Ratchet?
the guy
That
said.
would come in very handy.
Yeah, great.
No, I didn't hear it. I was
The
being
final
eaten
test,
by
I will give you this
whoever
power
that
to
is.
try for yourselves.
Oh, nice.
Whoa.
Yeah, we never see those two again, by the way.
And the scientist
Oh.
died.
Yeah, we don't see them again, so for all we know, yes, Liz, maybe he did died.
The scientist died, and that monster creature was executed as punishment.
Don't get too excited. This is for relatively simple puzzle solving. You have the plant dislodged, and then there you go. You pour water in these context-sensitive places, which creates an according fruit depending on the color of the plant. In this case, it creates a bomb that you can use to destroy a context-sensitive spot. Again, it's because of a limitation of the hardware. There's only so much they could do.
I don't get to make my own giant red plant monster that eats people.
Sorry, Dwebs. If anything,
Dwebs?
yeah, now when I
Why?
really think about it, I don't think you get a context-sensitive plant that recreates the carnivorous flytrap.
Why wouldn't you want a carnivorous plant monster?
You
Great
do-
to
Because
kill.
I'm not Poison Ivy.
You do get a weapon, or Stanley, as we mentioned. You do get a weapon that has, Venus flytrap capacity in the next game, but even then it doesn't resemble the one from this game. You get just a couple of simple variations, like the stair, like this stair, for example. Like a beanstalk. But again, it's understandable again because of its strong limitation. The real challenge of the puzzle is the fact that you eventually have to. It's best if you clear the enemies beforehand, because otherwise it turns into an escort mission where you have to deal with the plants potentially dying if it receives any kind of damage. So. And yes, the weapons do level up once again, starting like we started doing since the second game. And yeah, they even get the usual interesting upgrade when they reach max level. So again, this is still a relatively fun game to play on its own. And for specifically the PS4, PS5 releases, the Platinum is actually fairly doable. It's nothing that is too complicated to obtain. So even if you don't 100% fully the game, it's still overall very doable. That's the other variation, one that chucks you up. It's literally the chuckster from Mario Sunshine. Thankfully, Ratchet comes equipped with a bunch of the gadgets from the first game, the gravity boots and the hyper shot, so you don't really have to obtain those anymore.
And now, similar to Crash, we're in ruins with water that looks purple because of the sunset vista.
Yeah.
I don't remember the water looking purple. when
The
I
purple
played
water,
it.
if anything, it's more of a Spyro kind of thing.
Oh wait, never mind. I'm thinking of Crash to Insanity, where the water looks purple, but still, though, you get what I mean. Like the sunset lighting and all that.
So I think the purple water was in the fifth dimension because of the
10th dimension.
Oh, sorry.
That is a bit because of the red sky tint there.
Yeah, it's the new 52 dimension, basically. That's why Crash is evil in that.
Coming back to this game, okay, I did run into this game a bit as a kid, but like I said, it didn't leave too much of an impact on me. But again, that's more so because I didn't own a PSP, so again, it wasn't for any lack of quality that it didn't stick with me.
Yeah, again, the fandom is kind of split on both this and Secret Agent Clank, so far as going to say that they're the weakest link of a franchise. And like, if you really want to analyze that, I guess, but only because, again, the bar is relatively, at least on a medium side overall. I still think, despite having competent gameplay on its own, that Deadlock/Gladiator are probably, a worse time for you to have. While this instead is a more proper, more sized, adventure that the Duo does have, just on this kind of system.
In the circles I run around in, between the two, size matters is seen as the necessary evil, whereas the Secret Agent Clank is seen as the weakest link often.
The Secret Agent Clank does have some problems in gameplay, and the story is perfectly serviceable, again, if you ask me, but all in due time. For now, we're basically here. So, the deal with this planet, which has ruins, is that supposedly it might have, connections to the fabled Technomites.
Yeah, unfortunately, one trade-off. Unlike previous Ratchet games, the gear you wear and put on Ratchet doesn't really reflect.
That's because, again, the cutscenes are all pre-rendered, so...
I feel like at the very least they should have figured people would be, putting on the gear by this point, but... Especially since some of that gear becomes required to wear anyway.
Alright, this is your one and only Clank section in this. Clank will have other stuff to do in this game, so don't worry, it's not like you don't control him again for the rest of the game. But when it comes to emulating the Clank solo sections that the PS2 trilogy did had, this is the one that you get early on in the game to boot.
My guess is they ran into troubles with trying to render all the bots that you can control for sequences.
Because Secret Agent Clank will have a lot more sections with the gadget bots. So yes, they eventually...
Yeah.
Again, it's clear that High Impact listened to a lot of the feedback that this game received and tried to fix those kind of things for the title that they did after. So,
which kind of makes me wonder, why didn't they really get to do more Ratchet and Clank stuff past Secret Agent Clank? Was it the reception?
No idea. Might have been also the sales. Remember, as I mentioned, by that documentations that popped up from the data theft from Insomniac themselves, apparently the data charts, the sale charts that Sony had for the PSP showcased that the best-selling first-party title was instead the Dexter spin-off. Which wasn't even done by High Impact. I don't remember how fair these two actually qualified, but I can imagine not much because the consistent problem with the PSP is that the sales were not that high due to a combination of, higher hardware and software costs and very easily hacking, potential for people to have.
The PSP had the combined issue of, by handheld standards, it was very expensive. And again, you could tell it was Sony's first ever time with a handheld. It was a very good first effort, don't get me wrong, but you kind of see why the Nintendo DS beat the pants off of the PSP. More affordable, more games, essentially, and all that
I argue
jazz.
on the long run, this still takes a bit of a cake because it manages to have games that are not bound by specific gimmicky controls because, the technology of the PSP controls was easily translatable to an equivalent to the DualShock instead of having weird stuff like the touchscreen or the microphone or the motion sensor.
Press the triangle button to exit the bot flinger.
Is it just me, or has Ratchet's personality here gone backwards a little bit?
We mentioned that earlier.
Like I said, he's still a bit of a jackass, but not to the point of hating Clank. And like I said, it will change his tune very quickly.
It's like this. You'll see some mannerisms from him, but it's nothing that makes him too annoying. It's just that, like,
written by new writers.
Actually,
So.
yeah,
It's
that's
like
a good thing. Let me check. Go on. Sorry.
It's like I mentioned. I feel like they made this extremely newcomer friendly, not just for the fans' sake, but for the writers' sake. Try and play with what's familiar with Ratchet and Clank. What would anyone who's tertiary at best with the fan base know about Ratchet and Clank, and work with that essentially. Now I can't say for sure if that was the case, but it does feel like that's the case.
Oh yeah,
make of that what you will.
I mean, to me, the worst offender regarding this kind of thing is, of course, Sly 4 for me personally. But fortunately, this one doesn't have the same kind of thing where the different writers screw the pooch. It's more so that there's something that just feels off because you can tell that Insomniac is not involved in this.
Okay, it still might be because Wikipedia tells me that the one writer for this was Oliver Wade, which was one of the co-writers for both Going Commando and Up Your Arsenal. But
okay,
well, IMDb doesn't really don't tell me that kind of credit, so I don't know what kind of source they have and how much truth is in that.
Okay, I'll be fair. IMDb
maybe?
I'll try.
What about try the Moby Games site as well? That's usually good with bringing up a whole games crew.
Moby Games is also good. I'll check Moby Games while Teo checks the wiki.
Okay, if assuming Oliver Wade was involved, then I'm going to subscribe to my theory that he wanted to make it newcomer friendly because, again, PSP, potential whole new market there, essentially. Make it so that if you were coming in from even just the first game, you'd be relatively fine. Because from what I recall, heck, you could just as easily say that, oh, Quark is such a washed-up loser after the first Ratchet game, and you'd probably
the plot of this game is very, aside from clearly being set after a specific point in time, the plot of this game is very, very self-contained, and again, the only time it has been referenced is directly in Secret Agent Clank, which is told that some of the events happens immediately after the end of this one, but as we stated, the canonicity in the franchise as a whole has been questioned multiple times, so
definitely
I don't know what to tell you. For as far as I'm concerned, they can still be perfectly canon, and I don't think anyone will lose their sleep.
And again, like I've said, it's perfectly newcomer friendly. That's not a knock against it. It's just something I've noticed and ties into, like how you said, it's very self-contained. It's not hurting anybody.
In comparison, Jack and Dexter: The Lost Frontier is much more rooted as being a direct sequel to Jack 3 and Jack X Combat Racing. So again, it might have been just a deliberate writing choice from Oliver Wade, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, again, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, like, with this being a PSP game to a series that was already making money, I don't necessarily see this as a Sony executive mandate. It might have just been something Oliver Wade did as a calculated move, which, again, honestly, I think it's fine. Like, you know, I look, you won't hear me saying that it's the best story. I still think so far, from where we are in the series, the best one was Up Your Arsenal. But this story, from what I recall, is perfectly serviceable and gets the job done, certainly better than Deadlocked, at least.
The wiki, the Ratchet Clank wiki doesn't tell me anything on the matter of the writing.
And neither does Movie Games.
So again, maybe I'll try to search more in between parts.
It was written by somebody, that's all.
Well, we already, again, assuming that that is true, we do know what it is. I was just trying to see if it was verified or not. Anyway, we open the door. Ratchet, wake up.
Ratchet.
Ratchet would not really fall asleep that quickly on the job.
You put that on there. We do not.
And Clank would not do something that reckless either.
It's clearly a Mulder and Scully situation where Clank wants to believe stuff.
Yeah.
To the presence
Hey,
of
Treasure
Pokitaru,
Planet!
This is still set in the Solana galaxy. Although again, it does raise a bit of a question now, because, yeah, as Clank is about to say, a lot of these planets have not been explored or not on charts, and I'm like, how is it possible that they not be catalogued and properly given coordinates to them for the kind of, you know, galaxy system that is it? Mind you, this is not a problem on this game. Most of the franchise does incur into this problem, you know, in general, so again, probably for the sake of comedy, but it does raises a couple of questions.
I honestly
Mhm.
think they should have just, again, do what the original trilogy did. Have it be set in a different galaxy to avoid that plot writing problem.
I can mention more about stuff like the composer later, because instead, now we're actually going to go to Calydon, as mentioned. So that's where we are going in the next part to see if we can actually save the girl and discover the quote-unquote secret of the Technomites. And I guess we're just leaving Quark behind. No, really, Ratchet and Clank actually kind of forget about him until he pops up later. So that's neat. But at least the story acknowledges that at the very least. Alright, see you
Yeah.
for the next part.
See ya.
See ya.
Yeah.